All right, Julia, there you go.
Okay. So I usually do present with my coworker, Sarah Edwards, but I know she is here today. I know she's attending. I am one of the birth to 3 teachers from Illinois School for the Visually Impaired. I have been in this position for about 11 years, but that was a career change for me. I started off as a chemist, and I was working in Boston when my daughter Mary was born. And shortly thereafter, she was diagnosed with severe visual impairment and multiple disabilities. And at that time, you know, we were so fortunate to have the support and resources of Perkins School for the Blind, and we were able to participate in the infant toddler program. And that experience is what inspired me to go ahead and change careers. And not only that, but to devote all of my career to birth to 3, because it was so positive and such a powerful experience for us. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, make sure that's going to work okay. Okay, let's go back to the first slide and start the slideshow. Okay, so today we're talking about communication for young children with visual impairments and additional disabilities. And the reason I'm here solo is because this topic is something that's very, very important to me, both professionally and personally. So I mentioned that I'm a parent of a child with visual impairment. She's also diagnosed with multiple disabilities. And so that's something very personal to me. And it's something that I've struggled with both professionally and personally. And so I'll just take you on a little bit of a journey with us, the way that communication journey that we went on together, my daughter and I. So this is a picture of Mary. She's almost 3 years old in this picture, and she's playing a horn that was part of a horn hierarchy. And it was about a series of about 10 horns and whistles and recorders that she had to play that was part of her speech therapy program. And she completed that hierarchy. She also completed a straw hierarchy. And she did lip prints exercises. She did bubbles, we did turn-taking games and imitation and all kinds of wonderful exercises that our speech therapist had recommended to us, but none of these resulted in her being able to produce speech. And so sometime later, it was probably when she was in preschool, that my perspective shifted. And so this is when I had gone back to school, started learning about visual impairments and how it affected all different areas of development. And I shifted my perspective from having her speak to having her communicate. So I really wanted to work on having her communicate. And that's when everything changed. But I also wanted to mention, and I think this is really important, that every victory that she had, every breakthrough that she had in terms of that communication was led by a teacher of students with visual impairments. So every time, you know, something good happened in terms of communication, it was the TVI who brought that forth. I think our role is unique, and it's so important because we understand the effect of visual impairment on communication, and we're that member of the team who brings this knowledge to the table. All students with visual impairments have difficulty with concept development because of that incidental learning piece. We know that children who have typical vision, they learn by visually observing, they learn by imitating, they just watch their caregivers using objects throughout the day, and they learn what they're called. So children who are missing, even just at distance, they might even have good near vision, but if they're not seeing all of these things happen at distance, they're missing concepts, which then leads to limited receptive vocabulary. So then a child has less to talk about or less that they understand. Delayed pointing is also another effect of visual impairment on communication. We don't often see our little ones pointing to objects in the distance because they're simply not seeing them. We have also on the social piece, a lack of understanding of that nonverbal communication, such as facial expressions, gestures, and body language. That's all learned incidentally, that's all learned through visual observation. And also those communication skills that involve conversation rules and social norms, just the way people interact with one another when they communicate. So then we add in additional disabilities. We add in other limitations such as motor limitations and hearing loss. And that leads to fewer sensory channels or fewer learning channels. So we know that children use all of their 5 senses plus movement to learn. But when we take away, additional, we've already had, some vision loss. If we also limit motor ability, and then if there's an additional sensory loss, there are fewer sensory channels through which children can learn. Motor limitations also can include lack of a reach or a point, or even moving to that desired object. So then children don't have as much access to objects. They're not able to get their hands on objects, and they're not able to indicate that they might want to play with an object. Children with cognitive delay, they typically have slower processing. So they might just need more repetitions, more exposure to a concept or an object in order to learn it. So they just need that extra time. And so that slower processing can make that communication piece more difficult. And finally, sensory issues. And I'm always thinking of my little students with optic nerve hypoplasia when I say sensory issues, because sometimes with them, they're so overwhelmed in terms of sensory, they're just trying to regulate and they might not be processing language. So where do we start? So let's say you're on a team and you're having the IFSP meeting coming up, and the family, the team, they want to create a communication outcome or goal. So where do we start? Always start with whatever assessment data is available. And your assessment data, if you're a TBI, you have the functional vision eval, and you might have a learning channels assessment. You might have compensatory skills assessment. Any data that you have, you bring that to the table. But we also need the complete picture of the child. So we need to consider all of the IFSP team's assessment data. That might be motor information from an OT or PT. That might be a global assessment, which includes cognitive level, social skills, other things that we need to consider. So then we can look at visual skills, motor ability, cognitive level, social skills, positioning, and that's both the child and then the materials, sensory integration issues, and then most importantly, what the parents bring to the table, which is what the child likes and dislikes. And so prior to the meeting, we should be starting conversations with families. We talk about their routines, because all of these outcomes need to be based on their routines, because that's how they work. When we embed those skills, we embed those practices into daily routines. We also need to learn about the family's priorities. Like, what do they talk about with their child? What's important to them? What do they want represented? What means something to that family? And so all of our decisions in terms of outcomes or goals should be based on those family routines and family choice. So when I start talking to my families about creating communication outcomes, I always want to remind them that they're already doing the most important work, laying that foundation for language. That's because they are developing that trusting relationship with their child, that snuggle time, skin to skin or face-to-face time. That's helping that child learn, that social, that one-to-one bonding and establishing touch as a way to communicate. The families also have the ability to use their routines. If they make their routines more predictable, if they do them the same way, beginning, middle, and end, and this doesn't have to be like their whole daily schedule be regimented, but just the little routines that pop up throughout their day, whether that be changing the diaper or going on a car ride, whatever routine that they do repeatedly on a regular basis, they just need to do it the same way every time. And then that allows us to embed those concepts and vocabulary in a context that the child will understand. So I like to start in terms of making outcomes with receptive communication or input. And that's because so much of expressive communication is built on receptive language, is built on that vocabulary and those concepts. So receptive communication it has two components. First of all, the sense that receives the message, and that can be more than one, and then the ability to understand the message. Thinking of those goals, so those outcomes. If we are having the conversations with the families early, they can be, they can have input on these goals. Sometimes I feel that goals are suggested to families, they're not really fully participating because they don't know what their options are. So let's give them some options. In terms of receptive, I really like to see consistent responses to input. So we want to see that the child is starting to understand those messages. They can also be teaching concepts and receptive vocabulary. And this is when I like to use a lot, teaching about what different objects are used for in those daily routines. We could also be teaching time concepts and sequencing, such as first then, this comes next, thinking about transitions from one activity to another. And finally, we could be teaching symbolism. We want to build that level of symbolism. Wherever the child is, we want to increase their symbolic understanding. So these are our options for input. I got this list from an article by Deborah Chen in 1997, and they're in order of most concrete receptive option to most abstract. Now that said, obviously speech is here at the bottom, but that does not mean we're not talking to our babies right away at the beginning, because of course we are. If the babies have a hearing impairment, of course we're signing to them right away. So that's not an order of how you must do this. It's just an order of how abstract they are. And so we have touch cues, gestures, object cues, tangible symbols, and this is interchangeable with tactile symbols or tactile cards. They all mean the same as far as I'm concerned. Pictures, signs, and speech. So let's break those down a little bit. Touch cues is where I start with most of my families. And the reason for that is because they're already doing them. They don't realize it, but they're already doing some of these touch cues naturally. And so when you phrase it to them that way, so you're already doing these touch cues, we're just going to be more thoughtful and make sure that they are done in the same way and on the same part of the body each time. So but the purpose of a touch cue is to let the child know that something will happen, help them anticipate, help them make transitions, and help with the structure of their day. Touch cues may lessen or prevent tactile defensiveness, which is a great, great goal. Some examples for one could be hello. I was just working with a family the other day, and the mom, the way she greeted her child is she rubbed his back, a little back massage, and that means hi. So we just talked about teaching her whole family to do that. Whenever they greeted the child, everyone should say hi and rub his back. And that lets him know, someone is greeting me. There could be a touch cue for changing the diaper, whether the child's, the parent will tap the child's ankle or the underside of the leg, whatever works for the family. As long as they choose that touch cue and everyone does it the same, it doesn't matter. There's no, prescribed list of touch cues that we need to follow. Sit is another example. I've heard sit, giving a little pressure to the shoulders. I actually saw this in a session. I was doing a co-treat with a PT. And so we were working on sit, and the PT said, well, that's great because then you're giving input to the trunk as well. So that worked out. Gestures are another option. And remember, these are gestures we are doing to send a message to the child. So the parent or the teacher, we are doing these gestures to express a message to the child. So for an example, one most parents are already doing, which I'll point out to them, is putting their arms out when they're going to pick up their baby. And then we see, does the child respond to that, right? I think that's even on an assessment on the Oregon. Do we see the child responding to familiar gestures? Well, that's one of them they see a lot. We point to objects to bring attention to them. We could extend our hands, give me, my turn, that's for me. We could offer an object, like, here you go. This is for you. Mine, you could indicate yourself, touching your chest. Come here, kind of moving your hand towards yourself. And then sit, you could be patting a chair. Those are all gestures we're doing naturally. So again, pointing this out to the parents that they are already communicating with their children, it inspires them and gives them more confidence. So object cues, this is one of the first places where the teacher students with visual impairments really made a difference in terms of my child's communication. Her team wanted to start with pictures, but her TBI decided that, looking at the picture of the whole child, that maybe object cues would be a better place to start. And I personally love object cues because they make so much sense to me, because when we start working with very young children with visual impairments, we always talk about using real concrete objects. Use as many senses as possible to explore objects, to learn what they're used for, to learn that concept. And so then extending that into using objects to represent activities, that just makes sense to me. I really like that. So you don't have to use any particular system with your objects. You can set them up nicely the way they are pictured in the photo. I love that this mom is using shoe boxes. I mean, it's such a great idea. It's such a nice, clean presentation. And I think a lot of people have shoe boxes in their homes, but you don't have to have shoe boxes. I had just a little bag that I used to carry around with us and just pull objects out. Because what we were using them for was anticipators. I'm skipping down my list a little bit. Object cues are just used to let the child know this is going to happen next. This activity is going to happen. And so what we typically do is we take an object, we present it to the child, and then that object is used in that routine. That's where we start anyway. We use the real actual object that appears in that daily routine. We do want to transition to a similar object. So say, for example, we're talking about a spoon. You know, we could use the real spoon that the child would then be fed with to start, but then we would use, you know, any spoon that could come out of the drawer could be used to represent eating the same way we did with the actual spoon. As I said, they can be used as anticipators, just telling the child this is going to happen, or they could be used as a calendar system. And the setup with the shoe boxes, that presents itself that way. So you could go through the day, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and you could have a finished box for when each activity is completed. This is from an article at Paths to Literacy, and the mom writes about both object symbols and tactile symbols, and it's a really great article if you have a chance to check that out. So tangible symbols are next. I said they're interchangeable with tactile cards. If you hear them called different things, they all kind of mean the same thing. So tangible symbols are either whole objects or parts of objects, and they're mounted. So that's the difference. They're mounted on cards, or they're embedded in cards. And they're used in much the same way as object symbols. They can be used as anticipators. They can be used as a calendar. You see this little guy, he's going through his day in school. Just to anticipate what things are going to happen throughout the day. You can use those with a finished box. What I like about tangible symbols is that they're easier to position. So you could put them on just a choice board the way they are in the picture, but you could also put them on a slant board, which I have something like that here, which then that helps both with visual complexity. It also helps with having things at eye level. And that helps with kids who might have trouble with head control, so they don't have to move around so much. If we have it up at eye level, we could put them on a ring of cards. I know Sarah mentioned to me a while ago that she had a family, they had theirs made out of thinner cardboard, so they could punch a hole in the corner and put them on a card, put them on a ring, and so they could take their ring of cards with them. So it does make them much more portable to take with you and use in different environments. They should always be thought of as a bridge to other abstract forms. I have as a bridge to 2D symbols because I feel that that's the most concrete example. So you're thinking a 3D object on a card, and then the next step would be pictures. So in fact, that's where we are now. We're going to talk about pictures. And I really do want to take a couple of minutes and really explore pictures, because my first statement here, I'm not a big fan of pictures, especially abstract drawings like the one you see here. I don't feel that they're appropriate for very young children with visual impairments, and not all, but just when we're talking about the population of children with visual impairments and additional disabilities, I think they can be really difficult. So I have a couple of reasons for that. When you have a 3D object, you have multiple senses with which to access that object. You have your sense of touch, you have your sense of hearing if it makes a noise, sense of smell. If you're a baby, you're going to put it in your mouth, so you're going to use your sense of taste, and you'll use any available vision. So you have all of those learning channels to access that object. Versus a 2D flat image, all we have left, the only sense that can access that object is our vision. And so if the children, you know, we're talking about children whose vision might be unreliable, if they have difficulty with processing, if their acuity is low, you know, that's going to be a challenge for them to rely on vision alone and take away all that other sensory information. So some students might not have those requisite vision skills in order to, you know, maybe they don't have the skill of scanning a whole object, a whole picture. Maybe they're not fixating on it long enough. So there are a bunch of reasons why visual skills might not be up to the level where a child could use pictures. Some students might not also have the requisite cognitive skills. So let's just talk about this particular picture here. I use that as an example on purpose because I do the Oregon assessment so many times, I kind of remember where different items are. And I know, just from memory that, and probably many of you do too, that identifying 1 to 3 body parts upon request by pointing to them, that's around 2 years. It's the very end of 1 to 2 years in the compensatory section. So I'm thinking of a child who has the skills of an almost 2-year-old. I mean, that's developmental level. And that child can identify their body part in 3D. So how many of my students with visual impairment and additional disabilities are at a 2-year-old level, a 24-month level before they leave early intervention? For me personally, I would say only a handful. So a lot of them are still going to be at or below that level developmentally in terms of their cognitive skills. So they just don't even understand that concept in 3D. And then we're asking them to make that leap into this abstract image in 2D, relying only on their vision. So that's why I think pictures, we should just really think carefully before we're using pictures. And I do like to help parents understand this by using my very low-tech vision simulator. This is a piece of saran wrap, or you might call it cling film or plastic wrap. And I just took it and I scrunched it up and folded it over itself a bunch of times until I could make, a very nice vision simulator for low vision. And this would only help to simulate a child with low visual acuity. And then I have parents look at the pictures through my saran wrap. So I feel that this helps. This helps them to kind of understand how pictures might be difficult. And now we need to make even more considerations for a child with CVI. When we're thinking about pictures, and some children with CVI, they are able to do pictures. So as I said, it's not all of my students that have difficulty with pictures. So some kids can. And this article below from Paths to Literacy, this tells the story of how a mom helped her child transition from objects to photos. And you can see that she really she's very thoughtful in how she presented them. But first we need to know, does the child have enough visual attention to even achieve meaningful fixations on the pictures? They need to be able to look at them long enough to decipher them, to decode them, to understand what they are, and then identify them. We need to think about complexity. Solid color background is always good. That black background is lovely, as featured in the picture. Using a single colored object is really helpful. Color highlighting can help. And I've even seen an example where the salient feature of an object is highlighted. So for example, if it was a picture of a dog, I'm just throwing that out there. If they highlighted the tail in a color, just to highlight that salient feature, novelty is really important. And then this photo that I have here really illustrates that. So the mom who wrote this article, she took photos of her child's tactile cards. So she started with those real objects. She then moved to tactile cards of those real objects. And then she took photos of the tactile cards of those original real objects. So really helping with novelty, really supporting there. And then finally, looking does not mean understanding. We know that. Working with children with CVI, we need to make sure that we can verify that they understand what they're looking at. So if we do decide to go with pictures, and many teams do, and remember, we're led by our parents and what they would like to work on. And if we're going to go with pictures, we can really help support that. So first of all, we're going to go with a real photo or a drawing. Personally, I love real photos. I think that starting with that concrete representation, it should look exactly like the real object that the child recognizes. That's my opinion. We should all consider size, and distance, complexity, backlighting, and perspective. So you see these pictures on the right. In the top, that hard hat is placed on kind of a busy wood pattern table, which also has glare, the way the photo was taken. And then we look at the picture below where, we have the nice black background, but they've also turned the hat on its side, because perspective really matters. And I know this. I had a student who ate a Yoplait yogurt every day, And one day her yogurt was knocked on its side and she couldn't find her yogurt and she was devastated. And it was just laying there on her tray, but she couldn't recognize it because she couldn't see the foil top, that shiny foil top on her yogurt. So perspective really matters when our children are just learning these concepts for the first time and learning, you know, which features identify an object for them. So in order to understand, for our understanding, if our students can pair objects with pictures, do they really know what they're looking at? We should use those objects to transition. So we'll present the object and the picture at the same time and talk about that object. And one way I like to do this with families, I think this is really fun, is to do a digital book story box. So if you don't already have access to the Paths to Technology digital library, I'm hoping I sent Catherine the link ahead of time. It's a really great resource that gives you many, many digital books to choose from. There are even some that are appropriate for children with CVI. A couple weeks ago, I was doing one with a family. It's called Vegetables. And so we had a bunch of vegetables for the little boy to explore while we were reading this story box. So, you know, one page would have a tomato and one page had a potato. And the one he loved was the green pepper because he sniffed that green pepper and he just thought that was the best thing ever. So then with repetition, you know, we're hoping that he can make that transition to pictures from real objects. So sign and speech, they are the most abstract forms of communication. But as I said at the beginning, that doesn't mean we're not talking to our babies right away. If the baby has a hearing impairment, we are signing to them right away. And we are trying to label objects in the environment. We can obviously pair them with objects. We're trying to teach the child what the object is, what its verbal label, what its sign is. We could be describing the environment. We could be asking questions, and we could be modeling both the motor movements if we're signing and what our mouths are doing if we're speaking. We need to consider, especially in terms of signing, the child's preferred visual field. Like, where are we going to present those signs? Distance, how far are we away from the child? Background or clothing. I'm wearing a terrible shirt for signing today. That's because I'm presenting. Like, if you saw a teacher who does sign language on a regular basis, she would have an all solid colored shirt to be a visually accessible background. Excuse me, that's my dog. You also need to be very consistent, and that is with both sign and with speech. Everyone should use the same language or the same signs across all environments and team members. So for example, if we're going to call it a cup, let's all call it a cup and not one person call it a sippy and somebody else call it a drink and somebody else call it a glass. You need to all use that same consistent language until the child can generalize. Okay, so Elia, we're at our halfway point here. If you wanted to stop for a minute.
Let's see, I'm looking. No, there was a question about the PowerPoint. No, the PowerPoint isn't available, but we do have handouts available. Julia, did you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, that I shared that, so that should be accessible to everyone.
Oh, it is. Oh, okay. Okay. I wasn't, all right. So I'm sorry. Then we'll make sure that we can get that to the participants in the Dropbox that we have going.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question about what is the difference between anticipators and calendar systems? Are they the same thing?
Well, so I think of anticipators, and I do actually have this bag. I didn't want to show it because it's kind of embarrassing. This is the actual bag I used to drag around with my daughter. This was our bag of anticipators. And so I would just have things in this bag that we would possibly do during the day that would represent things we would do during the day. So for example, you know, if she wanted a drink, we had her cup, you know, to offer, say, okay, it's time for a drink. If we might be going to the park, I would show her this. It's a rope. This is a curtain tie back, but it felt just like the rope on the swing at the park. So this is what she felt when we went to the park. That's from her perspective. And so that was our anticipator object for going to the park. I also had this is a car seat cover for going in the car. So it wraps around their little seat belts. when they're in their car seats, and hers were nice and fuzzy. So this meant we're going in the car. So I'd give that to her. We're going to go for a car ride, and then she'd know. One of my favorite ones, this is a scent cue for telling her it was time to take a bath. So you can still smell it. This thing is, I don't know how many years old. You can still smell that shampoo that would tell her it was time to take a bath. So that's what I would consider anticipators. I mean, a calendar system does help children anticipate this is going to happen and this is going to happen, but they're really set up in that systematic way. Either like the mom had with the shoe boxes, one after the other, after the other, after the other, or with the tactile cards, just set up in an array that in order in the correct time sequence. And often with calendar systems, the teacher or the parent will take one object, use it in the activity, and then when they're finished, they go to the finished box, which is at the end, and say, oh, we're all finished. It's going in the finished box. So that really helps the child understand, okay, this is complete, and then we go to the next object. So it's much more systematic. I think it's a little bit more challenging, especially with a very small child. So I usually suggest the bag, or some families have a basket in their corner of their anticipators, or, you know, they might decide to put it on a choice board like this, just to have things, a couple things. Okay, this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. However families want to do it, it really doesn't matter, but that's the main difference between anticipator can be, you know, kind of free form, and calendar is much more regimented. I hope that helps. Anything else?
Sorry, I was having trouble getting myself off of mute there. Let's see. No, I think that was the only question so far, so that's good. Okay, keep going.
Another drink of water.
All right, there you go.
Okay, so expressive communication, that's where most parents want to be. And I know I was exactly in that frame of mind. I want communication. I want to know what she's thinking. But like I said before, I think it's really important to start with receptive and lay that foundation in order to have things to talk about when we start having children express themselves. But very first, we need to look at how is the child communicating right now? How does he or she respond in different situations? You know, is it through body language? Is it through vocalizations? Is it by getting very still or just giving that attention, or by crying? You know, we need to take all of these behaviors as communication. Uh-oh, I'm stuck. Okay. There we go. Okay, so communication goals for output. I know I have sat in many IFSP meetings, and I feel like I see a very similar goal offered up that sounds like this. The child will use signs, words, or pictures to express his or her wants and needs. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one. It's probably many others of you have heard that same goal. And I think that happens when the parents aren't really there. We're not talking to the parents before the meeting and giving them other options. So we could have lots of different communication goals or outcomes. The child could be requesting an object or activity. They could be rejecting an object or activity, responding or acknowledging some information. They could be sharing attention, that good joint attention goal, using a focal point. They could be asking for more information or for more details. They could be commenting on an object or an action, or they could be asking a question. So I feel like we don't need to limit ourselves to that requesting, you know, expressing wants and needs, that we can really get a little bit more creative. So here are output options. And I really like to talk about all of these different options with the parents to help them make that shift in perspective that I did when I was learning about visual impairments, when I was learning about communication, because their children are already communicating with them. So it helps them see, you know, that speech, sign, that is not the only goal. We want communication, and we want to use as many of these output options as possible. So before we go into each of them, I just want to go through the progression of symbolic communication. So I made this little graphic based on the AAC CBI matrix by Russell and Willis that just came out last year. And this is the reference for it if you haven't seen it yourself. So their graphics are based on the communication matrix, which has 6 levels of symbolic communication. I like to keep things as simple as possible. So I really appreciate the way they condense them into 3. We have pre-symbolic communication, which includes body and limb movements. gestures, and vocalizations. We have concrete symbolic, which includes conventional gestures such as a head nod, objects, tangible symbols, photos, and pictures, and then abstract symbolic, which includes speech, sign language, printed language, braille, and abstract shapes. And I just think it's important to talk to parents about this to show them where their child is currently, how's that child communicating right now, and then where we need to go, like what's next, what should we be aiming for? So this is a picture of Mary and me in the apple orchard when she was a little younger. She's using visual attention to indicate what she wants. She has her eye on that object, and I know very, very clearly that she wants that apple. So children can use fixation to indicate what they want. If they have a choice of two, they can use shift of gaze and then fixate on their preference, their preferred object. If we have an array, they can scan an array and then fixate on their preferred object. So they can use all of those visual skills to indicate that they have a preference for something. And I do write that outcome pretty often, that children will use shift of gaze, from a choice of two to indicate a preference, indicate a preferred object. I really like that one because it combines visual skills and communication. So body movements and gestures. And again, I have more pictures of my child. So this picture is showing Mary at her camp for children with special needs. And this was on the day that the firemen came to visit. And this very kind fireman was letting the children explore the water from the fire hose. And you can tell very clearly that Mary not only wants to touch the water, but that she is just filled with joy. So I'm so grateful to both the firefighters and the person who took this picture, since I wasn't there myself. It's just really clear. Her body language and her gestures are communicating with all of us really clearly. For some kiddos, though, their bodies don't get they might get active, but they might also get still. So I know you've probably seen that, the kids that when they are communicating, when they are paying attention or responding, they get really still and quiet. And so, you might mistake that for the opposite, that they're not expressing themselves, but that is their way of expressing themselves. Children can reach for objects. They can bring their caregiver's hand to an object. I see that a lot, like, I'll just make you do it for me, or get me the thing if I bring you to the object. Some children do point, especially if it's at near. We don't see a lot of pointing to objects in the distance. We do try to work on that, pointing to objects at near. And then we have the head nod. And this is another place where my daughter's teacher of students with visual impairments just made a huge difference, not only for my daughter, but for me, for my family as well, because she taught Mary to do the head nod. So when Mary was in preschool, we just weren't making a lot of gains in her communication that first year. And her TVI suggested that we work on having her do a yes, no head nod for communication. And it sounded a little weird to me at first. I never really had thought about that approach, but I said, sure, great, let's work on that. And so she taught me to have Mary feel my face, and Mary would feel her teacher's face at school. When we were doing yes, yes, feel my face, no, no, feel my face. And then we'd also teach Mary to take our hand to her face. She was in control of that. And so then we could gently guide her to a yes, no tactually. And it took a while. It took almost a year, actually, but it worked. And so now we have, and from then on, we've had this reliable means of communication. It really does buy you a lot of language when you can ask a yes or no question and get an answer is indicating what your child wants to communicate. So it can be life-changing, and again, led by the teacher students with visual impairments. So object symbols, this time we're going to use them expressively, and we can use them for choice making. We can use them for requesting. They can be the focal point of the conversation. They can really meet any of those objectives or goals that I listed before, but really the key is access. So in order for the child to initiate communication with an object symbol, they have to have access to it or them, right? So I think it's important to have a setup like one of the two pictures shown below. Either you have some little bins, that are easy for the child to access, or you have a little board. This looks like the all-in-one board, what I think, but you know, something that has Veltex or something you can stick Velcro to. You could just get one of the slant boards from the office supply store and use double sticky Velcro tape, just to make sure that those objects stay put, that they're in a place that that child can access it. And we're talking about kiddos who might have motor limitations. So they might not be crawling over to get their basket of objects always. So just making sure that they can reach for them, they can grasp them, they can indicate the one that they want to the best of their ability. So I like these two presentations for objects if we want them to be used for expressive communication. So tangible symbols, again, they can be used in a very similar way that we, as with object symbols. And the only difference between an object symbol and a tangible symbol or tactile card is that the objects are mounted in this, with tangible symbols. They're mounted either on a card or embedded in a card. This is a picture of some tangible symbols that one of my former families made. And all we did was I found a sheet of, you know, kind of heavy cardboard from the dollar store. And I brought some double sticky Velcro dots. I think mom actually ended up hot gluing some of the objects. She also had some creative ways of embedding objects like that cup. And they threw theirs in a bag most of the time and took them just kind of like what I did and took them everywhere, but they were used for choice making eventually. And this kiddo, he went on to reach higher levels of communication, more abstract forms of communication. So it was pretty successful. I do recommend homemade cards for early intervention, and there are a couple reasons for that. So first of all, we are kind of trialing this. And I just want families to feel that, you know, we can try this in an inexpensive and fairly easy way before we would make a big investment and buy a set of commercially made cards. The second reason is that we can customize them. So when we are, you know, I'm providing those cards and the family uses their own objects from their house, and then that enables them to use the exact object or a very close representation of an object that the child would be using in the activity. Or at least it's something the child has seen before, they're familiar with, they've had their hands on it before. So I feel that they're more customized and individualized for little babies. But the APH Stacks cards are excellent. They're what my daughter has used. And so they may be the next step. So I like to try these first, but we teach parents about the Stacks cards so that they know that they might be an option for the future. Okay, so now we're back at pictures, but this time expressively. We need to go back and think about all of those considerations that we had when pictures were used receptively. So thinking about presentation, think about, you know, if we have a nice solid background, think about lighting, if it's backlighting or task lighting. We need to think about if we want a communication board or a communication book, like how are we going to present them? And the first picture below on the left, this is from an article from Past to Literacy. And the mom, she set this board up for a child with CBI. And so she has some nice CBI supports in there. You know, she has the dividers in red. She has the black background. She has it on a slant. It's just really nice supports for a child with CBI, even with an array of, you know, she has 6 possible objects in that choice board, but they were definitely moved slowly towards that goal of having 6 choices. As I just mentioned briefly, lighting, but lighting is important. So task lighting if the child has an ocular impairment, backlighting for a child with CBI. We can use the familiar objects pictures. They're in the center photo below. Most of the objects featured in these pictures can be found in family homes. So I like to use those when we're doing that transition from objects to pictures. So then you can match those up on the light box, which is nice. And kiddos tend to just like to play on the light box anyway. So it's just another way to engage them with that type of activity. Now I have here tablets. I only suggest a tablet for my families if there's already one in the house. So I never suggest that people go out and buy one. If they have one in the home, then I might suggest that we use a tablet for pictures. And the reason for this is because it does provide that backlighting for students with CBI. It can be very appropriate for them. And so there is a very lovely app called Sounding Board. It's free. I believe it's by AbleNet. And when you first open it up, you'll see there are some ready-made boards with pictures, but those are not the ones I use. It has a feature that allows you to use your own photographs to make a customized board and then add your own voice to it as well. So you can do, you can start with simply one object and have the child tap the screen if they're able, or use a switch to activate it and touch the screen. And then you can use a field of 2. You can set it up vertically or horizontally because it's a tablet, and you can just turn it. But I like those real photos that you can use to represent, look exactly like the real object when you're representing it on a tablet. Now we're back at sign and speech. Again, this is the most abstract form of communication along with print and braille. The child may use sign as an expressive form and then use a different receptive form. So it's really, we need to look at the whole child and, what is that child able to do motorically? What is that child able to do cognitively? And what makes the most sense for them? The child might use a combination of signs and speech. What I've heard discussions, one over the other. It's not a choice, it's just more. So I support that in my families. If the child is going to use both sign and speech, I feel that it helps them, communicate in any way that they can. And finally, we need to consider motor skills, especially when we're talking about signs. Some children aren't able to form the signs completely as they would be traditionally done, or they might need to do a one-handed sign if they're not able to use both hands together. In my opinion, if the entire team recognizes that sign the way the child does it, then I think that works. I want the child to be able to express him or herself as much as possible. So if we all decide, okay, this is what this sign means, we all agree, and that's consistent, then I believe that's a valid form of communication. Now we have access technology. I saved this for the end on purpose. So access technology is, it's something that can be a big investment for families. It can be both time and money, but not all of them. So we do have examples such as speech output. You see a picture of Ivan from Wonder Baby there, and he is using his speech output button to communicate. That's one that we can help with. We can help support the team with choice of color, or whether that needs to be a tactile speech output button, with a different top on it, whether we color highlight it, we use some different tape or Mylar. There are lots of different things we can do to support that. It might be on a slant. It might be positioned differently in terms of the child's visual fields, like where would they see it best. Other choices for technology are a tablet. And I mentioned that before, I only suggest using a tablet if the family already has one. But again, a tablet does offer some nice visual supports. That backlighting, the images are nice and crisp and clear. You see the picture on the right, these pictures, if you look at the bottom, that article's from CBI Teacher on WordPress, and she talks about this specific example. So it's a great article, and actually all of Ellen's articles on using pictures and other communication modes for children with CBI are really, really great. She talks about that these were originally a set of laminated pictures, and she compares that set of laminated pictures to putting them on a tablet and how much nicer the images are, how much more visually accessible they are. So sometimes a tablet is a good choice for a child, especially a child with CBI. My final example is an eye gaze system, and this one is a very expensive option for families, and it does take a good investment of time. And so I feel like that should be a very, very careful decision with the whole team. And we have to look at the whole child and just be confident that the child would be able to use that system in a meaningful way. So again, we need to balance those visual supports. So things like color, size, field, complexity, also positioning, making this technology as as visually supportive as possible, as visually accessible as possible, but we also need to balance that with the child's overall abilities. And some of that is the child's understanding of symbolism. You know, is the child able to cognitively process these images and then make that connection between 2D images and a 3D object or an activity that it's representing? I feel like that's a pretty big leap for any child, but we are talking about children that are very young and some of them very, very developmentally young. So it's just, let's have a really careful conversation about that. So whatever mode of communication we choose, we need to make sure that that communication is meaningful for the child. So as I said previously, we need to look at how is that child communicating right now? You know, how is it body language? Is it vocalization? Is it gestures? Observe that child carefully and teach the parents, you know, to really notice those other modes of communication that they aren't naturally, you know, thinking of as true communication modes. Although they're absolutely valid, but have them really pick up on that and together as a team, observe and take data on that. And then think about, does the child have a reason to communicate? Thinking about our kiddos with multiple disabilities, we have to give them those opportunities. We have to give them access to, you know, objects and materials so that they can show us their preferences, so that they can indicate that they want something or they don't want something. We need to engage them. And I know that it's a lot of work and think for a parent to think, okay, I need to, you know, make sure my child is having this constant conversation with me, but it's natural. It's what we would be doing with our babies anyway. We're always communicating with them. And then next, once we know how the child is communicating right now, we need to think about carefully, how can we help the child reach that next level of communication? So whether it be going from the concrete to the abstract, going from pre-symbolic to more symbolic, we need to help them reach that next level. So first and most importantly, find conversation topics of interest. You know, this is where the parents lead the team. They know the child's favorite things. They know their likes and dislikes. They know what things the child wants to talk about. I saw a quote somewhere, I wish I could remember where I saw it, that the child will first talk about what the child wants to talk about. So I love that. They will talk about the things that they're most interested in and however they communicate that. We need to create turn-taking opportunities, both motor, you know, we could be doing motor games back and forth, even just clapping, patty cakes, different finger plays, and also communication, vocalizations and gestures, and all of those different communication turn-taking opportunities. We need to use routines, you know, those little conversations we're having throughout the day. Those are our routines. And games like little tickle games, you know, anticipation games. I'm gonna tickle you, I'm gonna tickle you, or I put teddy bear, it's the round and round the teddy bear. Probably not everyone knows that song and I'm not going to sing it now, but just any little songs that you would sing with the baby they're a routine and then anticipate something happening. You know, so in teddy bear, you get tickled at the end. Those little, you know, social games that children enjoy and that they learn are really a conversation between them and their parents. So our role, I know I've said this a couple of times, I just want to emphasize this one more time. I feel that we play such an important role in the communication of young children with visual impairments and multiple disabilities because we have a different perspective. We are, you know, very aware of the effects of visual impairment and additional disabilities on communication development. We see through that lens of visual impairment. We also have really important assessment data on visual functioning, learning channels, sensory channels, or compensatory skills. That's really important data that the team needs in order to make an appropriate communication outcome. So with the IFSP team, we need to help find that balance between a child's visual skills, their visual abilities, and their cognitive abilities, you know, that symbolic understanding and that processing, and make sure that whatever our outcome is or our goal is, that it's appropriate for that child in terms of the picture of the whole child. We need to modify any communication systems to make it accessible. And I put either visually or tactually. If the child is primarily a tactual learner, we need to modify it to suit that child's learning mode. And finally, we should empower parents to advocate for their child in terms of communication, just recognizing all of the ways that their child is communicating, knowing where they need to go next, and then knowing, the implications of visual impairment, knowing the kinds of modifications, types of visual supports that we add in so that they can go on and advocate in future years and help their children be effective communicators. So we can open it up for questions now. I hope that we can hear from some of you if you have any experiences with infants and toddlers in terms of communication. I feel that this is a learning journey for me, especially in this past year. And I feel that, more collaboration and discussion on this topic is needed. So thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. We have a couple questions.
Okay.
What do you think about going to miniature or partial object cues too early?
I don't like minis. I don't like minis. Should I say? Can I stop my sharing? That might help me see the chat better.
Sure.
I don't like minis because I don't feel that they give the perspective that the child with visual impairments has. So, right, a child with visual impairments can't feel a whole big car at once. So why would we give them a mini car? I think, like with my rope to represent the swing, we need to give the part of the object that the child would encounter when interacting with that object. So I've been asked that question a lot about, like, oh, can we use minis? It's just a smaller version of a real object. I don't encourage that. I don't think it represents that object in terms of how the child accesses it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the conceptual development, it would just confuse the kid in general if it's a mini, right? Like what you're saying, like a car.
I do. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah. I agree. Okay. And let's see. Let me scroll down. There was another. Have you used any SGDs that support motor planning and give visual auditory feedback? And do you work with the SLP when choosing communication modes?
Okay, you have to help me. SGD?
I don't know.
Whoever asked that question, can you type in what you meant by SGD? I'm not sure.
It looked like it was Jenna.
It's probably something simple and I'm just not thinking of it. Sorry. But I do work with, with the speech language pathologist. I always try to co-treat with them. I mean, in reality, it doesn't always happen, but I do like to reach out. And especially now that we're mostly virtual, it's become easier to get on a session with a speech therapist, a speech language pathologist, and talk about it. I do feel that we need to lead that, like get into that conversation early, because they might not think of working with us on terms of communication goal, because it's right. Sometimes we put ourselves in our little boxes, like they're working on speech, and we're working on vision, but really teacher of the visually impaired or a DTV, we know that we're actually working on all of the developmental domains. And so, we sometimes have to start that conversation and say, hey, there are some things we need to think about in terms of this child's communication, and I can support you in that. And so that really helps when you try and open the door to that kind of conversation early.
Okay, it looks like the SGD. Oh, where did it go? It means speech generating device.
Oh, that support motor planning. I'm not sure I know enough about that to answer that question, but they give visual and auditory feedback. I mean, like the Big Macs, I definitely use those. I've used ones, speech generating devices. I mean, that's the only thing I've really, as far as like the speech buttons that I've used. And it's not me that implements them. I just give support to the SLP who would be implementing that device. We would just talk about it and say, oh, well, let's get the bright red one or the bright yellow, or let me decorate that for you and highlight that and get some Mylar on it. Or, sometimes we put the clear plastic top and I can put some shiny Mylar on it, and just anything I need to do to make it more visually accessible. But I'm not ever the one who implements or orders that device.
Okay, got it. So a lot of it is that coaching, collaborating kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
working with the SLP.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Somebody made a comment about Zoom open the world, which it did. Let's see. Can kids with CVI use eye gaze technology to communicate?
Oh,
that's a good question.
So I know. And I'm just going to say that that is a great point for discussion. I have seen some webinars by CVI experts, and they have shown some of their students using eye gaze devices, but I am thinking of always infants and toddlers. So I think that all of the kids I've seen in videos and webinars have been older. So I think that would make a big difference in terms of their developmental age, in terms of their visual processing. Because remember, it's not just what phase they're in. And that CVI AAC matrix, that's a great resource for you. Whoever asked that question, I would encourage you to go look at that, because that matrix is really set up thoughtfully and systematically to show you. You look at the phase that the child is in, and then you look at their communication matrix level. Basically, where are they in terms of their symbolic understanding? And then you match up which communication mode would be appropriate for that child with those characteristics. I hope that makes sense. But if you go and look that up, that communication matrix, it is just a gem of a resource. It really is, because it answers it for each individual child, and shows you where, what communication modes you should consider based on their visual functioning in terms of CVI, and then based on their cognitive processing, basically.
Right, and that the CVI, the AAC CVI, they have, if you just Google it, it'll come up with all kinds of stuff, but there's like videos, I guess they're going through what they've developed. And so it looks like there's, hours of it. So
yeah. And if you are interested, I know I put the link to our, ISBI webinars at the bottom, but we are hosting Chris Russell on April
nice. 2nd. Okay.
Yeah, at 10 a.m. Central Time. If you want to ask him more about it, he would be a great person to ask that question to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So be sure and attend that webinar if you can. If you've got Chris there, that would be great. Let's see, another, go ahead. Somebody was.
I just saw somebody said toddler with CVI trying to communicate, use iPad, but poor fine motor, so slow to communicate. Yeah. iPads can be really great for children with CVI, but I wonder if they're using a switch as well, if you have poor fine motor. So it's all of those things you have to consider. It's all, the webinar with Chris is April 22nd at 10 a.m. Central. Okay. But yeah, the toddler with CVI, I know with the motor skills, it's so tricky. So trying to help them access an iPad, they might swipe it, they might not hit the thing they want, and then they get so frustrated. It is really tricky. I know I've done one of those two switches, those dual switches, and even that, the child can get frustrated if they, thank you, Sarah, for putting that up about the webinar. They can get really frustrated if they hit the wrong one. So I know the visual piece of the iPad is really great, but that's not always, doesn't always meet the fine motor needs.
Okay, let's see. There was another question about how do you teach about the whole with large objects?
About using, okay, where is that?
It says how, it's further up. How do you teach about the whole with large objects? Whole, WHOLE. Yeah.
Yeah. So one example is if you want to teach your child about the car, you take them to a real car. So, and I told this dorky story last month where I took my daughter to the auto show so she could feel a whole bunch of cars.
That is so cool.
And
that's
so I
fun.
let her the outsides of the cars and the bumpers and the wheels, and we let her get in and sit in the front seats and feel all the steering wheels. We let her get in the trunk. And I mean, she felt all of these cars, because otherwise car just meant her car seat with her little car seat cover that I had. That's what she thought of as car, because that's all she could see. But once she got to feel a whole car, then she could assimilate all of those pieces into a whole. So that's how we do. And I know that not every object you can do that. You can't like climb a tree, but you can take the leaves and branches and bark, and you could feel the different parts of it and kind of teach how those fit together.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I've done, if you couldn't afford to take your child to a car show or anything, I mean, I've done it with taking the kids to the parking lot at a school, like getting one of the teachers to like, hey, can we like explore your car, and letting us into a car, a van, you can get that set up as well. Or in your neighborhood, I mean, there's just different ways to approach it. If you can't, if the family can't get out, right, and take their kids somewhere or anything like that. So
I'm lucky. I live in a place where it's very inexpensive to go to the
we're in Central Illinois. So
I just
Yeah.
saw May's comment about having a consistent layout for speech. Oh, now I know what she means. Like those 4 communicators or like 8 communicators. And yeah, you do. I love it if you keep it consistent. I don't ever want to mix them up and test the child. I love keeping that layout consistent, and then they can choose. You can add buttons in like one at a time. I would definitely support that, like masking and making it more visually simple. As I said, I don't implement those devices, but yeah, that's the kind of support I would give if they were going to implement that kind of speech generating device.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you're consulting with the SLP and giving them advice on that, because they could misjudge or misinterpret as a child, you know, their performance or lack of performance, right? So
Yeah.
That really underscores the importance of doing that collaboration and making sure that you're a part of the services that your child or your student is getting, because they don't know what they don't know, right? The other professionals, they don't know what they don't know. They don't understand, you know, CVI. They don't really understand those, and speech and language is, you know, therapy is so visual. It's just so visual.
It is.
There was a question about how do you embed this in classroom situations?
Oh, so I only work with infants and toddlers. So if we're talking about, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about embedding, but I'm always embedding into routines. So family routines, so that our parents or our caregivers, they're really the lead teacher. And we're just teaching them how to use the little routines that occur in their days. I mean, if you wanted to apply that, the classroom situation is really structured. They do have their own EI classrooms. EI classrooms? Wow, we don't have them here in Illinois.
Yeah.
We do all home-based services. Wow, that's really interesting. Well, I mean, in a classroom situation, they have like circle time and snack time. They have all their little consistent routines. So if you use the same objects in those routines in the same way, and you call them the same thing every time, or use the same representative objects or tactile cards, it should work the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it would just have to be consistent, and it would have to be like if it's the para or, you know, the teacher, whoever is the one that's working with that student directly, it would have to be consistent, because I've seen where, you know, one person does it one way and the other person does it another, or uses a different object, and all that does is confuse the student.
Yeah, you have to be completely consistent.
Yeah, it has to be consistent for sure, but it can be done. I mean, I've seen it done. Okay, let's see. We did the SLP. There was a comment here. You presented such wonderful information and makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing your lived experience. I like your practicality, and I agree that knowledge of visual impairments is essential to understanding communication, particularly when looking at augmentative, communication tools, because those things are so visual. They are so visual. I've observed a speech therapist work with a child with eye gaze, and they thought it was fantastic.
It can very well be appropriate for children. And I just haven't seen in the populations of infants and toddlers that I have worked with personally, any kiddos who had that level of symbolic understanding that they could use it meaningfully. But that's just my experience. I mean, it should be an option. And like I said, in the CVI AAC matrix, he definitely mentions that. And it says when that would be appropriate in terms of the child's visual functioning and their symbolic understanding.
Right. Yeah, so that's why it's really important to go to that webinar. Just if you want to hear more about it or ask any questions, you can definitely.
We're super conservative when we're talking about babies. You know, these are little guys and girls, and also their families are responsible for that implementation also, right? So we're talking about you bring that into the home, and the parent is the one who's going to have to implement that. And I know it's, you know, some parents are up for that kind of challenge, but I just think that's a lot. That's a lot.
Oh yeah,
baby.
Definitely. I think you addressed this one about how do you teach about the whole shape of an object without using miniatures, right?
Yep,
you already, we did that one. The SGDs, which is the speech generating device, that have a consistent layout are good for motor planning. You can mask buttons you don't want, slowly add onto it, and the buttons the child memorizes where they are will not move when you unmask icons. So then ask your speech and language path.
Yep.
Sounds good. And then with choice making skills, somebody must have asked a question. I don't, that it just says with choice making skills. Yes. So I imagine that was somebody else asked a question and they answered that.
What about lions and elephants?
Okay.
Yeah. I cannot have my students touching lions.
No.
They can hear them. They can hear them. So rather than a mini, I'd rather have an elephant sound. You can smell an elephant. If you go to the zoo, you can certainly smell the elephants. You can smell the lions. Just try to have the child access that type of concept with as many senses as possible. I do the petting zoo with my students a lot here. The little petting zoo or the little petting farm, just to get them a little bit closer to objects, to animals, excuse me, that they can't necessarily really get their hands on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to go to, nope, not a petting safari.
No.
I mean, right? Have you walked around the zoo? You can smell when you're near the elephants.
Oh yeah, that you can.
Yeah. And you can hear what they sound like.
This is Catherine. So actually, you can be like, okay, Catherine, fine, that's Washington. But at the Washington State School for the Blind, someone actually donated all of their taxidermied animals.
Yeah, they did the same at the Kentucky school. Yeah.
They actually created like a whole display where kids can go in and they have things like bears and I think there's a tiger or something. But, pelts are also really good, like when you go to the national parks and that kind of stuff where they have the different animal things there.
Yeah, and it's so cool. I remember years ago I took my daughter to the St. Louis Zoo. So if any of the St. Louis people are still on here, I'm from St. Louis. So yay. We love our zoo. St. Louis had right next to like the zebra enclosure, they'd have like a zebra bone and they'd have a zebra pelt and they'd have things that children with visual impairments could explore right near where the zebras were. And same with some of the other animals. They had a rhinoceros horn near where the rhinoceros wandering area was. So you could feel that, so that there are other ways to, learn more. I know you don't get the complete picture, but at least you can learn more about those animals.
Right. And some zoos have like programs that they can send you like a kit that has, like you said, the pelts, how that feels, maybe even some like teeth, examples of that, skeletal things, ivory, of course, a lot of the zoos do have that. I mean, it's illegal to own it, but for educational purposes, some zoos do have that stuff too. So there are ways. It's just you got to be creative there. And sometimes some community parks or and rec services have like nature or wildlife programs that because we've done that before, where we've taken students and they were able to feel like snake skins and the back turtle shells.
Library Park here, Elia. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. So yeah, I mean, so a lot of it is getting creative and seeing, what's in your area. What are some things that you can check out, like from a zoo, a program that, to help teach about animals that's more tactile, especially for kids like ours that we work with.
And somebody mentioned using salient features for kids with CVI. That's a great suggestion. So if there are any animals the child is familiar with, you can use those same salient features to describe other animals. So if they are familiar with a dog, you could explain, the dog has 4 legs and a tail, so does a lion, but here's what's different. What makes a lion different than a dog? Well, it's that big mane, and then maybe you could have something that feels like that mane, and try to connect those. Or if they are looking at a picture, if they're able to access a picture, just highlight those salient features in color so they can really see, okay, why is this animal, why is an elephant an elephant? It's that big long trunk at the front. Highlight that. So there are ways.
Yes, exactly. It's just like I said, you got to get creative thinking about, but it's good to like being in a webinar like this, like throwing around ideas and people are listening to them. I mean, that maybe somebody hasn't thought about it before, like calling your zoo or the zoo closest to you, or even like the big zoo, San Diego Zoo, St. Louis Zoo, the Bronx Zoo, like they may actually have national programs where they send stuff to people. So, it's definitely worth asking about. Let's see. Looking, there are touch trainer apps to focus on how to touch the iPad.
Okay.
Okay, there was something there. Let's see. Okay, lions and elephants. We just went. Have you used communication systems for early mobility and orientation to home environments?
Early mobility. I'm going to think about that. I'm not sure exactly how that would, what exactly were they're asking me. I don't know. Can you?
Have you used communication systems for early mobility and orientation to home environments?
Because all of the ones that I mentioned today are kind of representing objects or activities. So, I mean, maybe for places, is that what, like, for what's represented places?
I was going to ask, like, Catherine, is that, would that be something that you would, like, that you might, that, like, that's kind of what this question is going for, since Catherine's an O&M, I'm not. So I just, like, I'm thinking like a tactile symbol for like kitchen, bathroom.
Okay, yeah, for
I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, like we had one in my bag for the park and for the car. It just depends on the family and what things are important to them. Like if they wanted to do one for a different room, like, yeah, that shampoo one, that would represent the bathroom for us. And you could have, you know, one to represent the kitchen, something that comes out of the kitchen that's, you know, not like their spoon, but like a pot holder, something that they would only find in the kitchen, or a whisk or something. So I haven't done that specifically for a family, but I definitely did it for myself.
yeah.
I know
it just depends on the family, what they're trying to represent. I've not had anybody ask me to represent a room yet.
And I know for sometimes, depending on the kid, if the kid is like more person oriented, then sometimes like a symbol for a person can represent the place. Like, say, you got a symbol for grandma. And when you're going to grandma's house or grandma's coming over, so it can go either way, but the message becomes, we're going to go see grandma.
Well, I'm learning something from this today. It says you can build it into mini routes, prompting the child to move towards that location or the door. And I love that. And I'm totally going to use that idea. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Oh, somebody said the DC Zoo will do tactile tours. That's cool. Let's see. Yep, they were talking about the O&M communication things for places. Yes, exactly. They can be used for anticipation cues before his child is moved from room to room, so the child knows where she or he is going.
I mean, it's transitions again. It's so great for transitions, just because it helps the child understand more of what's going to happen. You know, what's going to happen next. More predictability.
Exactly. Yep. That's awesome. And it looks like that I don't have any other questions unless I missed one. No, just lots of nice comments for sure. But no more questions. So if anybody else has any questions, throw them in the chat right now before we end. Let's see. Oh, just nice presentation. Oh, and yep, and asking for the closing code. So just we will, Catherine will put that in the chat box, and then I will say it in just a minute, just before we stop recording. Yes, there was a question about is this going to be posted for future viewing? Yes, Laura, it will be on our APH YouTube channel. And it will probably, I would say probably in another week or so. It usually takes about a week to get it all up. We have to match the captioning to the recording and do a little editing. And so it takes about a week or so, and it will be up for sure. And Catherine put in the chat box where you can also gain access to it, the aphconnectcenter.org/webinars. So, and there's other webinars there as well that Julia and Sarah have done before. So you'll be able to access some of their previous webinars in addition to this one. And then we have a webinar coming up next month. And I can't remember what that one is, but it's part of the
Braille.
Okay.
That's Braille 101, and that's Sarah.
Okay, Braille 101 coming up next April. Let's see, it would be April the 12th, I think.
I think so.
Yep, like the second Monday of the month. So we have a continuation of our EIVI series. So make sure that you be on the lookout for information on that, where you can register and join our EIVI team. again. So thank you so much, Julia, for for sharing all of this wonderful information. Oh, somebody said, asked a question, 1 p.m. Eastern. Yes. Oh no, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central. That's usually how it works. We start Eastern all the way to Pacific, so we can make sure we meet. we catch everyone in the middle of the day. So so yes, thank you again, Julia. So you guys, yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. It's always so meaningful to oh, you know what, my camera's off. It's just so meaningful to have you presenting about what you're doing as a teacher, but also from that parent perspective, how you have, you know, worked with your own daughter. It just brings everything, just ties it all up so nicely, and it's just so meaningful to everyone.
I'm just so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, no, thank you very much. So thank you so much for attending. Thank you to Julia, and we hope to see you next month for our Braille 101 for EIBI series. Thanks everyone. Be safe.